Hello YouTubers. Today I want to talk to you about an interesting technology that I was playing around with last night. And you know, if you're an end-to-end engineer and you know how hard it is to get your head, especially if you're a mainly back-end engineer that wants to build an end-to-end application, you're used to a strongly typed language. You don't want to do TypeScript or JavaScript. You want to do C# and somehow it still looks good. This technology might be interesting to you. You don't really have to learn a special framework in order for you to understand this one. This one is called Razor Components. It's a very interesting technology. It's still at the very beginning at its inception, but I was playing around with it last night and I wanted to show you what it's really capable of. So I'm gonna start here with an ASP.NET core web application, and then I'm gonna call it here a Razor demo web app. All right, and then I'm gonna select Razor Components. You could select a whole bunch of things with Visual Studio 2019, but you could do Azure, you could do React, you could do ReactJS with Redux, Angular. But this one is interesting, especially if you're a back-end engineer, and I'm gonna show you now why. So this technology basically runs on the client side. It's relying on Razor pages. It has a .razor page, and I'm mainly going to focus on something interesting, right? So when you build the application, it starts from scratch with something like this. There's a fetch data. Let me show you first what it does, and then I'll explain to you what it's doing underneath. This is something that you might actually find very interesting to play around with. So I'm running my application, and here we go. And then if I go to fetch data, it's going to go and pick up a bunch of data. The way how this is working is there is a service in here called Weather Forecast Service that has a function in it called Get Forecast Async, right? It picks up a bunch of summaries, it iterates for a range from 1 to 5, and then it generates stuff randomly, adding the summaries to its to the midst of it, right? So it's generating a bunch of things just to illustrate the works of going and fetching data from an API, right? On the front end, which is the part that we care about, there's fetch data, right? And fetch data basically is you calling in that service, and asynchronously on the page load, you're saying there's this forecast object that helps us determine, you know, whether we're still trying to fetch forecasts or we already have the forecasts and we need to render them in HTML. And then you're literally just calling the get forecast async. So you're not really doing any magic. You're just calling an existing method that exists in your service, right? Someone might ask me, say, am I limited to that? Of course not. If you can do an await and async, you can do anything you want. You could do a web client and make an API call and do whatever you want with it. So here's what we're gonna do. We want to add some interesting stuff to this, right? We want to see if we could actually start this whole process by clicking a button, right? So let's go in here and say button and say on click, execute that get data, get weather data, like that, right? And I'm going to show you, this is so simple and so easy, especially for people who used to build web applications in the past. So this is get data button. And also, not just that, I want to add an input in here. And this input is bounded by a variable that's called search query. So I have an input and I have a get weather data, right? And now it's complaining because it's smart enough to know that these things don't exist, right? In JavaScript will be like, maybe, I don't know. Maybe you have it, maybe you don't. So let's go in here and build these functions. So what we want to build is search query. So that's going to be just a prop. Search query, like that. Oops. And then I also want to build the method. So I'm gonna build a task, async, async task. I'm writing C#, get weather data. And what get weather data is doing is doing the exact same thing. It's saying forecasts equal await forecast service dot get a forecast async and datetime.now. So instead of datetime.now, let's change this. Let's pass in the actual search query. And since we don't need this anymore, we're changing the implementation. Let's completely clear this out. Right? So we're passing in search query, and we want it to bring in the stuff that we just look for, right? So instead of all this to array, we're just gonna say where weather forecast dot summary contains the search query, right? So I'm passing in a string, and that string is the search query, and the search query, it's filtering, right? And we don't care about the date here. Let's just put any date we want. Datetime.utc now. UTC now, like that. All right, so we're generating a bunch of things, and it's filtering based on whether the item that we're looking for contains that data or not. If you look at let's go back to fetch data here, and let's fix that search query. It's uppercase, so that's search query bind, right? And when the button is clicked, it's gonna make all that magic happen, right? When the button is clicked, all that magic will happen. So let's go in here and run the application and see if our changes actually took place. I don't know if it builds when you run or not. I hope it does. If not, then we're gonna have to take a look at that and make sure it works. So here we go. Here's our app. Here's fetch data. Here's the data. And then let's just say what are the things that we have available. Let's go to Razor demo app. We want to search for a particular thing like worm, for instance, worm. Right? Would that work? Check this out. This is insane, huh? So if I do amazing, right? Cool. The page isn't refreshing itself. The page isn't doing a lot. All the page is doing is basically it's going and asynchronously making that call and then doing some magic, right? All right, but I want to do something even cooler than this. I want the page to actually make a real API call, right? So a while back I built in that GU API application that has this really cool functionality. It allows you to search for cities and whatnot. So you can go do /API/state/cities, and then you put in the city name, and it'll tell you what the name is, right? What are the cities that follow that pattern, right? So if I pick that up like this, and I go in here, and I say /API/ I type the API twice. If I say /API/cities, and then type in Redmond, it'll make an API call, and it picks up all the cities that are called Redmond. We want to use that. We want to put that in place, right? So I could go back here to my application. Do we want to do it on the back end or the front end? Doesn't matter. Let's do it on the back end. Let's build a web client. I'm gonna have to remember that one. So using web client. There's a 1,000 million way to do these things. So do it however you want. Just make an API call, right? Web client. Web client dot what is it? Base address, something like that. And instead of Redmond, we're just gonna pass in the search query. Oh. So instead of Redmond, we're gonna say search query. So whatever we search for, that's what we're going to retrieve, right? And then let's see why this guy's complaining. A new expression requires blah blah blah. Yes, correct. Right? And Now we want to say web client dot get. I need to remember where the syntax is. Let me get that one for us. Yeah. So we have var response equal await web client get async. It doesn't know about get async. No, not a web client, HTTP client. So that's an HTTP client, and then we can do get async, and then we want to have the request URL, which is this one. Let's add in here the search query. Right? And then if the response dot status equal status code dot success, or what is it? Okay, something like that. Or we could do that. Is success status code. Could do it both ways. We want to return the response, right? So I'm gonna go and say var JSON string equal response await response get dot content dot read as string async. So we're reading the response. Now that I'm using a lot of awaits, I should probably put an async in here. And then we want to serialize. So we want to say return JSON convert. We'll probably use Newton Soft in here. And then serialize object. Deserialize object. We'll get to that one in a second. The JSON string that we received, right? So what's that object that we want? It's basically the geolocation, the stuff that that we're receiving. So let's change this to geo, and let's paste that stuff in here like that. That's basically the stuff that is already in the API that we're calling, right? So if we go back to where we were calling the API, basically this is what we're getting from that API. And while we're at it, we may as well just change this to geo, just to make things look better, right? So you geo, and then we're passing that, and then we're retrieving a possibly list of geos, like that. Right, so we got that, and we're retrieving a list of geos in here as well, list of geos, like that. And if not, then we return an empty list of geos, right? So new list geo, you could do that, or you could do whatever you want. You could return a null and take care of it. In that case, we don't need that guy anymore. So this is an API call. It actually goes and calls an API. And then on the front end side, we could go and say, okay, we don't need that anymore. It's not actually forecast, it's a list of geos. Super straightforward. And what? Forecast, search query, geos. What else are we missing? Task, geos, all good. This is the same object that we're iterating on, and now these geos have different properties in them. And the beautiful thing in here is that it gets to autocomplete stuff for you. So you get to go and say geo.id. I don't have to go back and try to remember because it's strongly typed, right? Let's do a little hack in here. So if I do Alt and clean all that up, it'll just turn that into geo. And then we get to clean things. What do I want? I want the city name. I want the state. And I want the I don't know, the zip code, you want longitude, latitude, whatever you want, right? And let's change these things as well. So city, state, and the zip code, right? So how things look like now, if I go and run my application, it'll actually go and pick up the information based on the city where that I'm looking for, right? Let's go in here and hit that. Boom. So if I say Redmond, it should go and pick up all the cities that are called Redmond. If I go and hit Seattle, it'll go and find all the Seattles, right? All the different zip codes, right? But still, there's something weird about this. It's not like, if you see, if I go back and forth, it says loading, but it's not really loading, right? So we need a special variable to take care of that for us. So I'm gonna build here a new variable, a Boolean variable that says search started. And search started is false by default, right? Search started is false by default. What we want to do here is that we only say loading when the geos are null and search started equal true, right? And we also want to start loading things when search started is true. I guess we could encapsulate all of that. Okay, that's dumb. Let's encapsulate all of that in one big if statement. So if we say if, let's take that guy up a notch, search started, only do that when search started equal true, right? Now, on the button side, we should only do search started when the button is clicked. So we're going to set that to true. And after this is done, we need to set search started to false. And I'll tell you now why. Right? Search started equal true. Right? So it won't show the loading part, that HTML part, unless, let's fix the indentation here. Oh. It won't show that loading part until you actually click the button. Right? So let's see if that's the case. Search started is set to false by default. Page should just say waiting. Boom. Uh-oh, that's not good. Let's see why that happened. Search started is true. Only when search started is true, go and say loading. Maybe we just need to rebuild our application. Fetch data. Beautiful. Now, it will only say search started when I click. Now, look at that. But then it disappeared. Something is wrong with our application. Maybe that search started, oh God. Maybe that search started false is not exactly what we want. Let's try that again. I hope I probably have to, hold on. I probably have to rebuild again. Let's go and rebuild this again. This is a way better, straightforward. It takes almost no time to understand. You're already a back-end developer. You already know these things. So let's try that again. Redmond, boom, loading, magic, right? Let's make it look pretty, right? Loading is kind of terrible. Let's say loading GIF. Let's find a loading GIF. Whichever loading GIF that comes to mind. I really don't care. Let's find one with transparent background. This one looks cool. So let's take that one. Is that the right image address? Yeah, that's cool. Let's put that instead, right? Let's put that instead of that stupid loading thing. So let's go in here And let's go and say, instead of loading, go ahead and do image source. Boom. So instead of saying loading, go ahead and play that little cute anime of something loading in the background. And it is loading. It's just showing you that it's loading. So it's done. Let's start that. Fantastic. Let's look for a weird city like Bellflower or something. Oh my god, that's a huge... Let's control that a little bit. It's a huge loading thing. Let's say, I don't know, style, width, I don't know, 10 pixel, something like that. Boom. I'm running out of city's name. Fairfield, Iowa. Boom. I don't think it took my changes because I didn't build. This part I don't like. This part I don't like. The thing I liked about Razor, using Razor with ASP.NET MVC is that you get to just update the HTML and refresh the page and it works. So this is something for the folks, but again, the technology is still beta. So you probably want to, you know, it still has some stuff. There's still some work to do there. Altoona. Did you see that? It's too small. Oh man, it's too small. Let's make it like 50 or something. 50 is better. Let's run that again. Fetch data. I don't know, is there a city called Newark? There is, I swear to God, I made that up. So you see that loading thing? That loading thing isn't really clear because the application is way too fast. So let's add a delay in there. Let's add a delay in our service. So if you go back and weather forecast service, not really weather forecast service anymore, it's more like geolocation service. And let's throw, what is it? Threading. That is it. Thread dot sleep. Dot sleep and have it sleep for like 2 seconds. 2000 milliseconds equal 2 seconds. And build, run. See how fluent this is? This is super fluent. You're building, you're making an API call and changing the HTML and everything is happening dynamically without you having to write one line of code of JavaScript, really. So let's try this again. Let's try New York. Look at that. New York City. We could try with anything. So. See that part? When I looked for another city, it didn't show that loading thing, right? We need to fix that. It didn't show that loading thing because the list is already full, right? The list of geos is already full, and we're saying here only show this when these geos are null. So what we want to do is that the next time we click on the button, we should probably set the geos to null, like this. All right, fetch data. So it loads, waits 2 seconds intentionally. Redmond, Washington, waits. That, now we're talking. So that's it. How many lines of code of JavaScript did I write? None. No JavaScript at all. and at the same time the application makes sense, right? The application, here's a button and here's a search query. When you click the button, it will call get weather data, right? Even if I wanted to refactor, so get geodata like that, and I did. Oh, you suck! It doesn't support. It doesn't support refactoring. That's fine. Still cool. Get geodata. You have a button. You have controls, and then you have what happens to these controls, controlling the state. To me, this is a lot better than using a specific JavaScript framework. You don't really have to do none of that. You know, you could just use Razor pages or Razor components, and things will look just beautiful, just as beautiful. Anyways, thank you for watching. This is just one of the exploratory videos where I get to check out new technologies. There are going to be a lot of those coming as part of the videos that I post on my channel. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya.